Hello, welcome to Tuesday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, and on screen we have a pentominoes puzzle. We're going to try two of these today, and these are like Tetris on speed, so yeah, I'm very much looking forward to trying these, I have to say. Today is a sort of birthday for the channel, by the way. We have this is our 100th day in a row that we have been doing two puzzles a day during lockdown, so we're quite proud of that. It's yeah, 100 days. I don't know what to say about it, but anyway, we're going to try and continue it for as long as we can. If and when Mark and I are eventually allowed to go on holiday, it might drop back to one video a day during that time. We'll see how we go. It's just very difficult if we do go on holiday to obviously rely on Wi-Fi, rely on the computers working, etc., etc. But yeah. We'll keep going as long as we can. Now, our mission, of course, is to bring you the very best puzzle content from around the world. And the two puzzles today are from gmpuzzles.com, which is one of my favourite websites. It's restarted recently. It's the brainchild of Thomas Snyder, and it's handcrafted content there that is, it's excellent. So definitely check it out. Now, the type of puzzle we're doing today, this pentominoes puzzle, it was only invented about 7 years ago. It was invented by Grant Fikes, and we've done a few of Grant's puzzles on the channel. And these puzzles have featured in the World Puzzle Championship in the meantime, and also last year in the US Puzzle Championship for the first time. So this is a popular form of puzzle, and I can understand why. It has quite a simple rule set and yet some nice, elegant logic. So yeah. It's got a lot to commend it. Why are we doing these two puzzles today? Well, I exchanged emails last night with Thomas Snyder himself, obviously the former World Puzzle Champion, 3-time World Sudoku Champion, as well as the curator of GM Puzzles, and he said that these two puzzles are brilliant. One of them is by Murat Cantonta, who's featured on the channel before, puzzle constructor from Turkey, and that's this one, in fact, on screen. And the other puzzle is by Jinhoo Ahn from South Korea, who's never featured on the channel before. But anyway, what did Thomas tell me about Jinhoo's puzzle? He said, it's glorious and gloriously hard. So I'm hoping this first one will be a little bit easier. The timestamp suggests that this first one should be a bit easier. In fact, I'll try and put a card on the screen or something now, so you know what to aim for if you are remotely competitive in terms of the time you take to solve puzzles. Now let me read you the rules. What we've got to do is we have to divide this white grid at the top here into pentominoes. Now, pentominoes is a very long way of saying something very simple. Pentominoes are simply 5 orthogonally connected cells. Like that would be a Y pentomino. That would be an X pentomino, etc. That's what we need to do. We need to divide the whole grid into pentominoes such that no two pentominoes of the same shape, and that includes rotations or reflections, share a long edge. Okay, so we mustn't have two of the same. If we had an N pentomino here, we could not then have that pentomino there as well. These pentominoes are the same shape fundamentally. And this would not be a valid arrangement of the puzzle. Now, what else do we need to know? We need to know that if a cell contains a letter, then the pentomino used to fill that cell must be part of the pentomino normally associated with that letter. Now, I realise not everyone is going to know which pentominoes are associated with which letters, so I have constructed this at the bottom. Well, to be honest, I constructed it using the help of Wikipedia, which had this arrangement in. And this consists of all 12 pentominoes and their associated letters. So if you're not sure what a P pentomino looks like, you can simply look at the bottom and you'll find the P pentomino there. So hopefully that will be quite useful. You don't have to use all of the different pentominoes to fill the grid at the top. You just use a subset of them if you want to. But yeah, that's all there is to it. Oh, and by the way, these sort of borders in the grid are dividing pentominoes. So in Murat's puzzle, let's talk about the construction of this puzzle actually. Look, we've got in order all 12 pentomino shapes. We've got F, I, L, N, P, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z, or Z, depending on which takes your fancy, in order. alphabetical order in the grid. It's quite remarkable. And all right, the T and the U, we're not saying we have to use the T and the U pentomino, but to use these borders to construct an alphabetical arrangement is still absolutely beautiful to me. This is a stunning looking puzzle, and this was, I think, rated as one of the very best puzzles from 2019 on gmpuzzles.com, so it should be an amazing solve. Do have a go yourselves. To play the puzzle, you click on the link under the video. Maybe I should show you Jinhu's puzzle as well before we start this. No, I haven't got it loaded. I'll have to pause this after we've done this one and load it up into the software. So you'll get to see it in a minute anyway. With that, let's get cracking. Now, because pentominoes or pentominoes is a relatively new puzzle type, I haven't done a great many of these before, but I do know some things about them. Like, I know when you have a Z in a corner, if you look at the Z pentomino at the bottom here, you can see that it fills a 3x3 region. It doesn't fill the whole of the 3x3 region, but it doesn't go outside of a 3x3 region. So once you know that this Z pentomino is bordered on its right side and below, we know that there is no arrangement of this that we can place now that doesn't also include those two cells. So these three cells are all part of the same pentomino, and that's where I would start. The other pentomino I know is very restricted is the X, and you can see that looking down here. If you've got an X on a border, then we can just write this in actually. Let's do that. It's got to look like that, so we can fill that in straight away. Now, that's interesting. Can this square be part of the W pentomino? And the answer is no. Because if we try and join this to this, the only way you can then put the W pentomino in is like that. And that isolates the bottom left-hand square of the grid. And that is not allowed. We must not isolate squares. So this square is not part of the W pentomino. So it's got to come... Oh, so it's forced to be a V pentomino that comes round the corner. So that's rather nice. Let's fill that, make that green. The W pentomino, well, you can see from the shape of the W pentomino, once you sort of start from either side of it, you then have to turn. So once we get here, we have to turn, we have to turn, we have to turn. So we actually get to place the W pentomino as well. Oh, now look, the Y pentomino is an interesting one because it has it has like a spine of 4 consecutive cells. Now, because of this U border, we can't place that vertically. So the only way we can find 4 consecutive cells in the bottom area of the grid is along the bottom row. So these 3 squares all have to be part of the same pentomino, and therefore, the X can't get to this square. The X is finished. So this square must be also part of the Y pentomino. Now the Y pentomino can't get to this square, so we get to complete the Z pentomino. And now we're going to be able to do the Y as well, of course, because once we know the basic shape of the Y, we know either this square or this square has to form the last square of the Y. Now if it's this one, because we know the shape of the Z now, we're going to isolate this little cell. That's not going to work, so we must fill that one in. This pentomino is completely forced. Look, that's got to look like that. Let's use green again for that one. I know people are already going to be moaning that I haven't used the 4-colour theorem. Sorry. Now, oh, yeah, now look, these 3 squares have to be part of the same pentomino, but they can't now attach to the V. The V is that shape, this purple shape at the bottom. So it's going to have to move, and once it does that, it can't take that square, look, because if it does, it's going to be connected to itself. There's going to be a V pentomino there, and I'm going to have to put a V pentomino here, and they're going to share a long edge. So in fact, this has to turn that way, and then it must turn up and become an N pentomino. The V pentomino is now forced. It must look like this. Right, and these 3 squares have all got to be part of the same pentomino. That isolates this square, so that must join it. And now the only way that escapes is like that. So we get a T pentomino. I'll make that yellow. Now we can use this, look, this 2x2 region here. That's not very helpful. I'll make that grey because it's not showing up when I show you the 2x2 region. This 2x2 region is boxed in. It has one escape valve, and that's here. Now, if it's only got one escape valve, there's no way we can put two different pentominoes in this ring of 2x2 here. So this has all got to be part of one pentomino, and it must also take that square to be its final cell. So that's a P pentomino, sort of rotated and reflected until it looks like a D. Or a B, actually. No, I mean, it's true to say I obviously can't write. No, it's a B. It's definitely a B. Oh, good grief. There's an I pentomino at the top, and it's bounded on the bottom. The I is the simplest pentomino. It's just a line of 5 cells. I can't put the line of 5 cells downwards, so that is forced. And I should have put that in first. Sorry. Now the F pentomino, it must always turn if it comes out of a corner. So the F pentomino is also forced. It's got to look like that. Right, now we can use counting to establish the L pentomino. Look, this L pentomino, it's a bit like the Y. It has a spine of 4 cells. So can the L pentomino come downwards like this? And the answer is no, because of what that does to the region on the top right of the grid. However, whether we include a sort of 5th cell from the L in this region or not, what we're left with is not divisible exactly by 5, and therefore it cannot contain the number of pentominoes that are going to be needed to not isolate white cells. So we know the L doesn't come down, therefore it must go across. Now, okay. So you can actually, you can sort of visualize this. But if this L comes down here, how do we make this N work without isolating white cells? So if we look at the shape of the N down at the bottom here, it's a run of 3 attached to a run of 2. Now, however I try and do this, if I have to hit this cell, hopefully it's obvious that you just can't do this without isolating some number of white cells down here. It's impossible. So in fact this can't be the last cell of the L, that must be the last cell of the L. Now these 3 squares are forced because again we mustn't isolate cells down here. You can see this N has to look like that, otherwise there's going to be a big problem. And okay, now where's the best place to look here? So these 2 cells have to be part of the same pentomino. The P pentomino. Now P is a fat pentomino, so it needs to go on a diet. But look, this cell, can it be part of the P pentomino? And the answer is no, because if we look at the P pentomino structure, if we put this into the P pentomino, we know the P pentomino will look like that. And now look at the problem we create below it. The only way we can fill is we've got exactly the same logic we had with these cells. This would have to be a P pentomino. It would attach to itself, and that is not allowed. So this square is not a part of the P pentomino, so it must come down like this. This is a different colour. And now I'm thinking these 2 cells are a problem, because if these are not part of this P pentomino, it doesn't matter how I arrange this P pentomino, I'm isolating these squares. So both of these squares have to be part of the P pentomino, because if we try and turn the P pentomino like this or like this, we're always isolating a square, so that's forced. This has got to come out. So now we've done this one, we haven't done. In fact, that's not probably the best colour I could have selected for this cell. let me choose a different one. Oh, bobbins. Somehow I've managed to box myself into a corner here. I'll change to orange. Okay, so we have to be a bit careful here, look. We've got to be a bit careful. If this domino here turns left and the remaining 3 cells of this pentomino are over here somewhere, what will happen above it? Well, we'd have to build a pentomino. 1, 2, 3. And where are we then going to go? Remember, we mustn't isolate white cells. And we have to. Once 1, 2, 3, wherever we go next, we could try and go here, but then we're going to have to go up, and we're going to isolate cells here. So this orange region has to go another cell upwards. Let's try that again. Actually, if it has 2 more cells this way, then again I've now got to fill 5 cells. 1, 2. And I can't do that because that's going to create an end pentomino like that. So if this one does turn left, the only way of not isolating white squares is to put an end pentomino above it, which attaches to an end pentomino. So that doesn't work either. So this has to come up again. Now I can make it red because it can't attach to this red. So that's good. So now it could come this way, and that would create an F pentomino next to it, or it could go this way, creating a Y pentomino, and then that would be, that's horrible. This doesn't work though. So again, a little bit of visualization allows me to see this relatively quickly, but let's look at this. This is lovely. If this does come this way and forms a Y pentomino, we now have to think about how we're going to fill this remainder of this region. And we obviously can't, this blue region here can't attach to this square because it will isolate a 4-cell region. So this square is not part of this blue region. So we've got to have this is all forced. Now we mustn't attach a P pentomino to a P pentomino, so we have to make this little yellow region an F pentomino by putting that one in to join it. So we would do this, we'd have to have a U pentomino for the blues, and now let's stare at the grid. This is the problem that I could see. How are we going to fill the remaining 10 cells of the grid? And in fact we get sort of a multiplicity of problems, because the only way of filling these cells without isolating white cells is to use 2 P pentominoes. But if you do 2 P pentominoes into these squares, and they would look like this, look what you've done. Oh, actually I need to use a different colour. Those. You've now managed to attach 3 P pentominoes to each other, which most definitely breaks the rules. So we can take this all back, and you can see that this pentomino here cannot take this square. So it's going to have to be an L pentomino, go vertically. Now, in order not to isolate, we have to go there, don't we? And you can see that we can't make this a Y pentomino, because then the next pentomino is going to be another N pentomino. It's going to attach to that N pentomino, so this has to be an F pentomino. What a clever puzzle. I mean, imagine designing this. This has to be a P pentomino. We've already looked at that logic a few times. Let me make that grey. That's going to be a safe colour. So we're left with trying to fill this in a way that doesn't break the rules. So how are we going to do that? We mustn't. So this square is the key, isn't it? It's a bit like we looked at before. This can't connect to here because it's going to leave a P pentomino below it. So this must be a different coloured pentomino altogether. These cells can't get to either of those squares, so they're part of this green pentomino. This is part of the green pentomino. We mustn't have a P pentomino, so this square can't be part of the green pentomino. That's it, and there we go. And that is how to solve Murat's puzzle. Absolutely brilliant. What a lovely construction. And this is only, half of today's video. So now I have to go and find Jinhu's puzzle and load that up. Right, 1 second. Right, here's Jinhu An's puzzle. Now, at first glance, this looks Very, very interesting. What a construction. We've got 8 clues only, and they're sort of symmetrically arranged, aren't they? If we sort of divided the grid along this line and we flipped this side of the grid over onto the other side, we would hit the exact cells. So these cells here are obviously a reflection about this axis onto these cells. We've got 3 W's, 3 Z's and 2 F's, and that's it. And apparently this has a unique solution. Glorious and gloriously hard were Thomas's words. Well, I can see why. Normally you have a lot more given information before you have to start one of these. Alright, well let's... I can see these Z's aren't part of the same clue, because if we try and join them together, we're going to isolate white cells in the bottom right hand corner. You know, if I do it like that or like that, I always isolate cells. So these are different colours, so let's colour those in appropriately. Now, neither of these now can reach here, and we can see that because the spine, if you like, the longest run of the Z is down its centre line. So if we try and connect this to either of these squares, there's always going to be something poking off the grid, whichever way we go. So this has to be a different colour. This colour has to now get out of the region, so that's going to be that's going to be the same colour as this, whatever this turns out to be. And is that as far as we can go? Ah, no, it's not as far as we can go. Look, if we try and take this square with this pentomino, it has to look like this. But now look, this green is going to block in our blue Z because it has to do that. And this Z is now, it can't go. It needs to go upwards after it's come across and created a domino. It needs to go up. It needs to do that. And obviously if it did do that, it isolates the green region into just 4 cells. So we can actually therefore say this is green because it can't be red. And obviously the logic works identically with this one because the position is symmetrical. So this green is a P pentomino, or a B if it looks like a B if it goes there, looks like a, I don't know, a pot if it goes there, or a pipe, I don't know. Oh, yeah, okay, look, now, because this pentomino here needs another cell, either this one or this one, let's look at this blue Z pentomino. It can't do that now. It can't, because if it does that, the green is limited to 4 squares, just as this one can't do that. Now that means that this Z and this Z are effectively bounded on their right side and their bottom side. Now why does that matter? Well, we looked at this in the first puzzle. Those 3 squares, therefore, have all got to be blue, and these 2 squares have got to be Z. Now that feels like a breakthrough. So we're going to... Well, it's a bit of a breakthrough because now this square can't be part of a Z pentomino. It just can't reach it. However we do that, it's not going to touch this square. Same as obviously true on the bottom side. So this square is part of a totally new pentomino. We'll make it grey. So that... take that one. So this grey has to come at least to this one, because it needs to have 5 cells in it. We're making a very pretty pattern. This Z obviously can't be the same colour as this Z, so I need to make that a different colour as well. I'll make that one green, because this green can't get there. This is fascinating, isn't it? It is fascinating. And it's difficult because I can't actually see what... I feel like I'm meant to appreciate something about these Z shapes. So if that one does that, that one has to be the same as it, because if it's not, so if this one does this and then this one does that, that breaks the P region. That one does this and this one does that. That's fine. So if, what about this way round? That's fine. Like that and like that is not fine because that cuts the grey off from its region. Right, so these have to be the same orientation, these Zs. They either have to do, both of them do that, or they both do that. That feels like... I'm not really sure. I mean, it feels like it's important to know that, but I don't quite know how it takes us forward. And I don't like guessing in these puzzles. A lot of people, the way they approach them, especially in competition, is they'll just throw in shapes and see whether they go, whether it works, and then they'll use a rubber prolifically. I'm not keen on doing it that way, so I try and do it a bit more slowly, which of course is completely useless in speed solving, but it's just the way my brain works. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to look at the W's now. Well, we've got the same thing straight away in terms of these W's can't be part of the same pentomino, because if we try and join them up, we're going to isolate cells at the bottom. Look, we either isolate 1 or 3 cells. So these two we can label as different colours. So let's start with that. Now this square obviously can't be part of the W pentominoes again, because you just can't get a W pentomino 3 along from itself. So again, we get these two squares are different. So can we do this same logic again then on the cell inside this 2x2 region? So does that not work? Oh, it doesn't work. It forces another W region. So if we try this, how do we now extend this green? You can see you have to go to there. Now, in order to not have another W region, which would obviously break the puzzle, we've got to extend that one further up. But in doing that, this W breaks, because now this W can't get out. It needs to turn after it goes 2. It needs to do that, and it can't. So, in fact, similar to this side, we've got the same constraint going on with we can't move the W's into those white squares. So this is another P pentomino. And it's the same, yeah, and now we can use our trick with the W's. So the W is a bit like the Z in the sense that once you can bound it on its left side and its bottom side, we now know that it's going to have to take those 2 squares. This one's going to have to take those 2 squares. So we're going to get more squares. Look. And similarly, again, this is fascinating. So the W's and the Z's sort of work in the same way geometrically when they're propagating from corners in this pattern. So these 2 squares have to be... They can't be part of the P pentomino, they can't be part of W pentomino, and they need to connect to each other. So, what colour shall I make those? Purple. Oh, now, look, we must be able to do something. We've isolated some white squares at the bottom. This is something we have to be very careful about. Yeah, we do, look, because this square can't be part of the W and it can't be part of the Z. So we need to fit a whole pentomino into these 6 white squares. Let's make this yellow. So that's got to be... and that means the W can't do that, because that would take 2 of the squares away, and there would only be 4 squares left. So we get to place our W pentomino. It must do this. This one now. Oh, that fixes the P pentomino. It looks like a D. That fixes another square of the purple pentomino. The W is fixed. This W can't be the same as this W, so it can't take either of those squares. So we need to... I'm going to make that a different colour. I'll make that one red. And actually, look at this purple. If this purple goes... Oh no, that would work. But we can get an extra... I thought I could get 2 more squares. I can get 1 more square, because it's not possible for this purple square to come up and turn right. That's impossible, because it creates another W pentomino and it attaches to lots of other W pentominoes. So if it can't take those 2 squares, it must take at least this square. And this square, now, this square is either part of the purple, or I guess the purple has to come here and this has to come out and up. I'm not sure. Right, so the yellow region now, that's got to be yellow. It's the only thing that can get to that cell. This has got to be yellow. It's the only thing that can get to the cell. This has got to be yellow. So we've either got a P pentomino or a Y pentomino for this yellow region. This Z can still go either way. So we know that the Zs have to be symmetrical. Well, they have to have the same shape. So what I'm tempted to do here is to count cells. If we look at this position here, we've locked a lot of pentominoes into the... if we imagine there's a boundary created by this Z pentomino and these pentominoes, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got 11 white squares to fill. But in order to fill those 11 squares, this Z pentomino here can only fill one of them, because whichever way it goes, it either takes that square or that square. So 1. The P pentomino gives us a second square, so 2. The Z pentomino gives us 2 more, that's 4. The yellow gives us 1 more, that's 5. The grey has got to give us another 3, that's 8. The purple gives us another 1, that's 9. So there are 9 of these white cells are dealt with by existing pentominoes. So 2 of the white cells, i.e. 2 of the white cells below an imaginary line that comes across here and includes these 5 squares and all of the... It's a bit annoying because this is yellow. Let me try and make that different. Let me make that grey. So of these 11 squares, 9 are catered for by existing coloured shapes we've put in the grid. 2 need to be got from elsewhere. So 2 have got to come in. Or another way of putting that is that... So can we use that to try and isolate anything here then? Well, that square's got to get out, because if this square is part of the purple, that just doesn't work, because this white square is now broken. The only thing that can reach it is the W, and it's not allowed to because it would touch another W. So this square has got to get out. That needs to be a different colour. I will make that colour... Oh, I don't know what to make it. Why do I always choose colours that don't help me? I'll make it yellow for the time being. This square has to get out. So this square is interesting now, because this square, we know exactly 2 cells below this line, have to extend into other pentominoes that exist in the top half of the grid. Well, if we try and make this part of one of those pentominoes that exists in the other part of the grid, we have to make that cell as well. And that's 3 cells that would need to poke out, and that's impossible. So this square must be part of a pentomino that is already coloured in the bottom half of the grid. And it can't be part of the Z, so it must be grey. This is part of the grey region. Sorry, let me just stare at this for a second. So this cell is interesting now. If that is grey, we break the puzzle. This is not grey. Now let's see why. If this is grey, look, the purple region now has to take its extra last cell from here. So this has become an F pentomino. Now, how do we stop this grey from being an F pentomino? We can't, because one of this grey has to connect to its friends. So it's either got to take that, well, that's an F pentomino, or it's got to take that, that's an F pentomino. And both of those are connected via this square to this one. So in fact, we can say this is not grey. And if it's not grey, and it can't be Z, it can't be this Z, this square has to be purple. Which means this square can't be purple, so that has to be yellow. This square now, that's our 2 cells now we've identified that need to leave this region, which means this square must be part of an existing pentomino. It can only be part of grey. Oh dear, I didn't mean to do that. So surely we can use this. That's yellow's got to come out now. So what do we need to avoid? Yeah. This grey mustn't be a Z, because if it's a Z pentomino, it is already connected to this Z pentomino. So this has got to go there and become a W pentomino. This square is isolated. That has to be blue. That finishes the Z pentomino, finishes the P pentomino, finishes... Yeah, that's got to be green because the grey can't get there. That means the Z pentomino is also forced, and we finally have a bit of traction here. After 17 minutes. Oh my goodness. Well, even Thomas said this was hard. So, what do we do now? This W can't take this square, can it? And it can't take this square, so it must go up. So we know it's going to turn now. If it turns this way, it's going to do that. No, that doesn't work. That forces a W pentomino below it, look. If we do this, this yellow region now has to be a W pentomino. That does not work. So this has got to turn this way, which means it's got to look like that, I think. So this must not be a W pentomino. So if it comes here, it can't go there, so it must take this cell. And this can't be an L pentomino, look, because that will touch, it will therefore be touching to another L pentomino. So this, and it can't be a Z pentomino. This is mind-bending, because if it's a Z pentomino, this cell is isolated, and it's going to have to connect to another Z pentomino. So this square has to be an F pentomino. The Z pentomino can't come to this square, because that's going to touch to its friends. So it's got to go up 1. Which means its only way of going to create a spine is like that. These 3 squares have to be part of the same pentomino, as do these. So this is a V pentomino. These 3 squares have got to be part of the same pentomino. Those have got to be part of the same pentomino. Now let's look at this region. These have obviously got to be part of the same pentomino, as do those. But if these are not the same shape, we can't get them out. We can't create a 5. There's only one exit from here. So these are the same shape, and therefore they must take that cell in order to not isolate something. So that we'll make that green. These can be purple as well, because the purples can be kept apart. So we're left with just trying to figure out the top of this grid. Now look, this F pentomino here can't connect to this because this is already connected to an F pentomino. So if we connect this to this, we have a big problem. So this F is a different colour to this purple. I tell you what we can do here though. We can use the fact that if we look at the structure of an F pentomino, it sits within a 3x3 box. And what I mean by that is it always fills up 3 squares vertically and 3 squares horizontally. They may not all be in a line. In fact, they're most certainly not in a line. But there's always one cell at the top of an F pentomino, one cell in the next, one cell in the next. In other words, it forms a wall. This pentomino block, however we put it, so that it touches this cell, it will have to touch 3 rows of the grid. In other words, it forms a wall. Now this means we've got to be very careful, because this can only take 2 more cells, and this is going to form a wall. So you can see, if I give this 2 more cells, there's no way to put another pentomino in here. This F pentomino has to cater for 3 cells to the left of it. So the only way it can do that, the only way you can do that is with that orientation. That is absolutely forced. So this is forced. Well, this square now can't be part of either that one or that one. I'm getting a bit worried about this. So let's make that grey. So maybe we do the same thing on the right now. So this F pentomino, again, it's going to form a wall. However it does that, because this needs another 2 cells, there's not enough for another pentomino in here. So we have to, if we give this 2 cells, this F has to take 4 cells to the right of it, because we know it forms a wall somehow. In other words, this can never get to here. That's impossible. This can never get to here. That's impossible, because it would have to come through the wall that is the F pentomino. So in order to take 4 cells, how's that going to have to look? It's going to have to look like that, isn't it? Isn't that the only way? I think it is. I can't see another way of doing that. There's no other way of doing that. That is how that has to look. So that gives us the purple. This square is isolated. That's purple. So we've just got to fit these in a way that doesn't create a problem. So I can see you can't make an F pentomino here. So this square can't be part of this region. This has to be grey. This square has to be, this square has to be grey, and it works. It works because that can connect, and that gives us an X pentomino to finish off the puzzle. And there we go. That is how to do that. Incredible. That was really difficult, but fascinating. Loved it. Let me know in the comments whether you enjoyed this. I know some of you don't like it when we venture away from Sudoku, but all I would say is that, once upon a time, people didn't realise that Sudoku variants were so fascinating until they tried them, and I think that's the same with these logic problems. Once you start to have a go at them, they are absolutely brilliant. I love that. So anyway, thanks for watching. We're back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.